Some 26 minutes after 7, you're still here on the AM show. Any comments on the things that we've discussed so far? Just go to facebook.com/Joy News on TV. Now, we know that the Ghana Medical Association, the GMA, they've said that they will go ahead with the next phase of their industrial action, which it says will culminate in the mass resignation of their members working as doctors in the country's public health facilities. A lot of actions yesterday. We heard the President, John Dramani Mahama, also make some comments that he will not yield to agitation by workers for wage increases, regardless of the political ramifications of such a decision, especially in the run-up to the 2016 election. Yesterday, Wednesday, a lot of things came out as well. The University Teachers Association of Ghana also declared an indefinite strike over their book and research allowance. And the Teachers and Education Workers Union, TEWU, they've also warned government that it may also embark on a strike if issues regarding their conditions of service are not dealt with. So lots of things in the labor front. Remember the lawyers in the Attorney General's Department who have also said that they've cooled off because of that compulsory arbitration that they have to go into. So I had an extensive conversation with the CEO of the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, who happens to be government's lead negotiator in salaries. My guest is government's lead salary negotiator, the CEO of the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, Mr. Smith Graham. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much.
So what is happening? I mean, strike here, strike there. Somebody said that August seemed to be a month of strikes.
Well, I have not taken particular note of the month, but I believe that once it borders on people's salaries and the conditions of service, you are likely to have a situation where unions would want to use the most powerful weapon available to them, which is strike, as a bargaining chip. So some of those things are to be expected, although sometimes unfortunate. But we believe that it is part of the negotiation strategies that sometimes are adopted.
Some critics say that government has not been proactive in all these. You know, the doctors are asking for conditions of service. They haven't had one, and they've been asking for it for such a long time. We see pharmacists in the public sector also very much unhappy because they say when you migrated them onto the single spine, they are worse off. The doctors have also got issues with their pension as well.
Well, if anybody says the government is not proactive on this particular case, I believe the person may be wrong. Why am I saying this? The whole health sector met sometime, I believe in March, thereabout, to decide to develop conditions of service, and they were all there. That was the first time I got to know that they were developing a collective conditions of service for submission to us. We know that in any conditions of service, we have what we call the categories 2 and 3 allowances also in the conditions of service. That is, in every conditions of service, you have the monitoring aspect of the conditions of service and the non-monitoring aspect of the conditions of service. We normally deal with the monitoring aspect of the conditions of service. We have termed categories 2 and 3. And even category 4 allowances within the public service. And we have processes that we are going through in negotiating the categories 2 and 3 allowances, so that after the negotiation, we can just bring everybody together and then negotiate the various allowances, and then it can be incorporated into their conditions of service. So everything was on course. To the best of my knowledge, this was in March, when they had their meeting, and after that they decided to set up a smaller committee to look into it. I even remember I sent a representative from Fair Wages to be on that committee, and they've submitted their document officially to us. So we're just waiting to conclude the allowances, the categories 2 and 3 allowances. Then we incorporate them into the document, and if there are any unique allowances to the health sector, we can look at it. But before we realized the pressure was coming from the GMA to want to negotiate a loan. Even that government decided to at least compromise although that is not supposed to be the norm. Under this dispensation, we are not supposed to be negotiating with, say, doctors alone, nurses alone, pharmacists alone. We are supposed to be negotiating under what we call the umbrella of a service classification.
Whose idea is this?
It's part of the policy. It's part of the policy. We have what we call service classification. And the service classification met sometime 2-3 years ago, and even looked at that service classification and came out with proposals for the service classification. At that time, we were thinking about implementing the Category 2 and 3 allowances then, before we had a national forum in Ho. And Ho, the consensus was that the policy is becoming a strain on the national budget, and so we should implement the policy in phases. And so the decision was to complete the migration before we tackle the Categories 2 and 3. That is the reason why we suspended the implementation of the Categories 2 and 3 allowances and then concluded the migration. Immediately we concluded the migration, if the media will remember, in January when we were concluding the negotiations, one of the things that we discussed, which was part of the agreement that was signed, was that this year we should implement the Categories 2 and 3 allowances, conclude negotiations and implement. The committee had completed its work and submitted the report. Now the report was formally supposed to go to the Public Services Joint Standing Negotiation Committee as a group. But before it goes there, we need to know what the financial implication was going to be. So when it goes there, we will then know exactly what to do. And so as part of the negotiation, we decided that we allow Minister of Finance to do the financial scenario, and then we gave Minister of Finance up to April or May ending to complete the work that they were doing. Minister of Finance was looking for June ending, but the pressure was that came on them and said, okay, do it by May ending so we can conclude the negotiations and implement from June. So everything has been on course. The other groups you mentioned may have one issue or the other on the single spine, but I can say that there's nobody who has been made worse off with the implementation of the single spine.
Really?
The policy is not supposed to make anybody worse off. That's the reason why the policy had what we call a conversion difference that is supposed to be paid to people. Where we are not supposed to be paying the conversion difference, we decided to use the interim market premium just to deal with that situation. So the interim market premium and the conversion difference came in to deal with any possible worsening of anybody's conditions of service.
But why would the doctor show me his pay slip, which clearly says that he's getting less pension after the migration than he was getting before?
Well, I think we've explained this previously. The idea is this. The doctor was on a certain salary under the health service salaries regime. That salary was a combination of the doctor's basic salary, normal basic salary, plus the extra hours, additional duty allowance that they were taking. The two was put together to now get them the health service salary structure. So what it meant was that even at that time, it means that government was even paying Social Security on the extra hours because it has been incorporated into the basic salary that they were taking. Under the single spine did not envisage incorporation of these allowances into the basic salary. And so the single spine was done based on the 40 hours of work for everybody. Now, having done that, we knew that that salary regime had a component which was the extra hours that they were doing. And that's the reason why we introduced in the health sector what we call the interim market premium as a proxy for the extra hours. And therefore, if you put these two together, they're not supposed to be worse off. The challenge...
I disagree with you putting both together because those are allowances for the extra work that they are doing.
Yes, it's supposed to be allowances as well and not incorporated into the base pay where government will pay Social Security on it. You see, and so the single spine tried to do this, but when it was done, the initial payment had a difficulty. The initial payment, and that is why we had to go through all these challenges one after the other. Some we have been able to resolve, through arbitration. Some we had to resolve through the court system. As far as I'm concerned, we've managed to resolve most of those issues, and I believe that we need to continue looking into the issue. There may be specific and isolated cases. Normally, when we put everything together, that is what normally creates the problem. If you put everything together and say that, we are all worse off, then you pull somebody's pay, so this person is worse off. It may be that there may be some isolated problem with the payment of that person's salary. So that is what I believe we need to be looking at the isolated cases and not necessarily putting everything together and say that everybody is worse off because of A, B, C, D. In any case, you know that we put together a committee to handle that specific issue of the doctors, and the committee went into it and came up with the recommendations. And so I believe that we all need to be patient with the policy. Previous policies have not worked because of this same stampede. The only difference now is that now we have an institution that is handling the policy. Previous policies were ad hoc bodies, and I can say that if this time round it had not been an institution, but it had been an ad hoc body, all these strikes would have gotten government to abandon it long ago. But because there's an institution that is working, that is why gradually there may be challenges, but we believe that as we move on, we should be able to resolve these challenges.
I know some skeptics also say that because of the IMF program that we've entered into as a country, doctors can cry all they want, teachers can also say they don't have conditions of service, pharmacists, anybody can say whatever it is that they want to say, but government will simply not budge because there's no money to give them anyway.
How does the IMF come in here? I don't see it, because normally in any negotiation, just as they have done, you submit a proposal, and it's a proposal, and government will come with a counter proposal, and we negotiate, and we reach a consensus. So IMF or no IMF, you bring a proposal, we'll come up with a proposal, and we'll negotiate.
We're overspending. I mean, and so if we're supposed to be working within a certain budget, and we're not supposed to go beyond it. These are additions to what we have.
And therefore, that will inform government on the negotiations that the government will do. It will inform government on the proposal the government will put forward. Because government proposal will always take into consideration what the budget can take. And so it is not necessary that there's an IMF program or no IMF program. Whether IMF program or not, government would have still done the negotiations based on what the budget can take. And the unions will come up with proposals based on what they think is good for them. And so it's the negotiations that will normally bring us to a certain compromise for us to move on.
Let's go back to the issue of the doctors. Courtesy a leak, we are now all aware of what they brought to the negotiating table. My checks indicate that formally you have not sat down after they declared that action, so you're not negotiating with them formally. Why not? Because we were told, for instance, that today, Wednesday, there was going to be a meeting, but they say no, they have not received any communication.
If you say formally, what does that mean? But there's been informal discussions.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have heard that
it's all part of
it's one phone call to one person, or another negotiation on another matter, and then this one comes up.
Not necessarily. Discussions are ongoing. I will not be prepared to disclose the last time we met and how we met and all that. No, but discussions are ongoing. In any case, when it comes to negotiations, formal and informal are part of it. If we realize that there's how do you call it? We are having an entrenched position at a point, and I will have to call the leadership, all of them, to an informal discussion for us to try to iron out a few issues before we go into the main meeting. It can be part of the negotiations.
Is that what you're doing now?
Formal negotiations are ongoing. Formal negotiations are ongoing.
So
it is true that we're supposed to have met today, but we met with them and agreed on a little adjustment because we are working on all this. And I'm sure when you came into my office, you saw that it is this very thing that we are working on now. we are working on the figures, looking at everything, so that when we call for the meeting, we'll then be able to conclude the negotiation as early as possible. But there's no stalemate. Normally when there's a stalemate or a deadlock, the two parties agree that now we can't go any further, let's declare. In any case, we've signed what we call the rules of engagement. And the rules of engagement spells out clearly when there's a stalemate, what we are supposed to do. When there's a stalemate, we are supposed to go to the National Labour Commission. And when we go to the National Labour Commission will then determine the outcome. So there are processes that we are all supposed to go through, even when there's a stalemate.
So with what the doctors have put on the table, I know that in the end you may not agree necessarily to the figures that we've seen, the details of the things that we've seen, but as it is now, can the wage bill contain it?
I normally do not discuss proposals of unions, because as far as I'm concerned, they are proposals. What is important to us as a commission is what has been agreed on. Because what has been agreed on is what is going to be paid. So if it is proposal, I'm always reluctant to discuss proposals, because they can submit any proposal. Government will also have to do its work. And in any case, when it comes to our side, it is not as if, let's say, Ghana Medical Association has submitted conditions, and so you just pick Ghana Medical Association and you start running with them, negotiating with them. When it comes to our side, it is not like that. Immediately it comes to our side, you are looking at a situation where, when they submit a proposal, you are looking at the possible proposal that has been submitted by all the others, its linkages, because you can resolve the doctor strike, and tomorrow you have other health professionals going on strike, and when that happens, the same patient will suffer, because they work as a team in the hospitals. And so that is what you need to always avoid. You look at the holistic picture, and then its implication not only on the budget, but its implication even within the environment where they are working. So all these things are done. That's the reason why when you submit a proposal and you say, conclude with us by this time, it becomes an unfortunate situation, because it is negotiation. And you know definitely the party you are negotiating with will have to do all these checks. So we need to give room for some level of flexibility when it comes to this negotiation. And I believe that when we adopt that posture, we should be able to conclude negotiation, especially when we are not happy and we know the processes that we have to go through in determining that. They could easily have gone to National Labour Commission on this matter. And once the matter gets to National Labour Commission will meet on it and probably give a certain order.
Yeah, but we know that there are institutions that have not respected the rulings of the National Labour Commission. In fact, that's why some people don't trust them anymore.
I am not sure of any institution that does not. Even any institution disagrees, they will go to court. We have disagreed with some ruling of National Labour Commission. We went to court. That is what the law says. Their decision in itself does not even become final. If somebody is not happy, the law makes a provision that once you are not happy with their ruling, you go to court. And so these are all processes that we have put in place just to ensure that we have some level of peace. You see,
we know that the doctors are bypassing the National Labour Commission.
Well, that's an unfortunate situation, but we will continue engaging them, strike or no strike, to make sure that we conclude. Are you taking
their actions serious? Because it's not just strike. They've decided to resign, really, so this is more of a notice.
It is strike. Whichever way you look at it, it is strike. How different is this strike from any other strike that the doctors have embarked on in the country?
Maybe this time around they are really
serious. It starts the same way. Yeah, so I disagree that it's not a strike. All the strikes they embark on in the past, they withdraw OPD services, they withdraw emergency services, and that has always been the process. So it's a strike. Whether the strike will lead into resignation or not is a different matter altogether, but we are all hoping that we don't get there.
Can we afford to let them go? And I'm sure perhaps you've heard people say that, let them go, let us go and take some doctors from Cuba and all sorts of things. Can we afford to let them go?
I won't go into these discussions. That these are policy decisions that government will have to take. For me, mine is to make sure that we don't get to that stage. Mine is to make sure that we conclude the negotiations as early as possible, and so I'll focus on that.
When actions like these come up, for instance, TEWO has also said that they do not have conditions of service for 5 years now. I don't want to say do you care about it, but does it bother you?
It does. And would I have been able to sleep under this situation? I'm sure you may need to ask my family to see whether it's a very difficult situation for everybody. But sometimes the situation is such that there's very little you can do, especially if you have been given a tax of this nature. If it's just a matter of unions submitting proposals and you just agreeing, that wouldn't have been a problem. But when they submit a proposal, you have to do all the analysis, you have to look at the budgetary constraints, you have to do every analysis that you do before. And so it's a very difficult challenge. I'm not sure TEWO can say they don't have conditions of service. They do, but it's expired. And we all agree that the conditions of service are expired. Some unions, their conditions have expired as far back as 2006. That is problematic, and that is the reason why a decision was taken then to suspend the negotiations of conditions of service until we conclude the implementation of the single spine. And so it was a collective decision that they all took, even before I came into office. I came to meet those decisions.
So is it that we haven't communicated to them that it's either, oh, we've now finished the phase 1 of the single spine, so we'll get onto these discussions? Are they not aware of the stage that we've gotten to?
Well, we take the decisions collectively. There is no decision we take on implementation of the single spine that we take in isolation.
So why are they
we take the decisions collectively. We take the decisions at the Public Services Joint Standing Negotiation Committee. So far as we are concerned, it is the body that negotiates all these things. And we go there and everything is tabled and we take a decision on it. And just yesterday, the committee met and the processes have started. We've looked at the document and all that. So that is why sometimes it becomes a bit problematic when these processes are going on and then there is strike. And so it creates problem for everybody. It doesn't allow the process to take its normal course. And I would wish that even today or tomorrow we conclude the categories 2 and 3 allowances and all the headache just go.
Would that end it?
To a large extent, it should. To a large extent, it should. Once you finish the categories 2 and 3 allowances, you'll be left with allowances that may be very peculiar to institutions. And even the peculiar ones are supposed to be decided on by everybody. The whole body Public Services Joint and Negotiation Committee is supposed to see the peculiar ones and agree that these are allowances that are peculiar to, say, the health sector. These allowances are peculiar to, say, this group. These allowances, it's supposed to be there. It's transparency. We don't want to conclude the general one, then people will just come and say, oh, these are peculiar to us and come in. No. And the decision of the meeting is that we want transparency. So if there's any allowance that is peculiar to any particular institution, table the allowance. Let's all look at it. Let's all discuss and know that these are peculiar allowances to you. The body will not negotiate the peculiar allowances, but at least they know that these are allowances that are peculiar to you, and then we begin the engagement with the organization to negotiate those peculiar allowances. So that body cannot negotiate the peculiar allowances, but the body has to know what those peculiar allowances are. And that is the process we are going through now. It's sometimes a painful process. You can meet and would want to meet again the next time, but the time that you would want to meet may not be favorable to either government or may not be favorable to the union, and so each party will agree and we say, okay, can we adjourn to this time? And so it's a collective thing that we are going to. It gives us should I say sleepless nights, but it's the job that we are doing. So whether sleepless night or not, all we need to do is to make sure that we do the best we can for the nation.
One final thing on the doctors. Is there trust? Can we go forward from where we are, considering the fact that somebody leaked details of the information that they presented out to the public?
If there's no trust, trust is end. That is what I would say. I know that trust is end. If they don't trust me, I will have to do everything possible to make sure that I earn their trust.
What do you think? Do they trust you?
If I believe they do. I believe they do. And they know from the bottom of their heart the Fair Wage and Salaries Commission will not leak such a document.
So who did?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I'm sure the doctors know that, knowing the job that we are doing and the complications and the of the job that we are doing, we won't leak a document like that. And so,
but it definitely would come from your side. Maybe not the commission, but there were other representatives from government there.
Agreed. Agreed, but we are the lead negotiators. Sometimes we go into negotiations at the Public Services Joint and Negotiation Committee while negotiation is ongoing. And the principle is that immediately we start negotiations, there should be no media discussions on it. But sometimes we start the negotiations, and when we close from the negotiations, the media has information. Somebody is officially even talking about it. And sometimes even while the negotiation is going, somebody is communicating to the media as to what is happening. They happen once in a while, but I think that when they happen, we don't need to take it. And if the doctors agree that it is a proposal that is submitted, I don't see why it should be a problem. The proposal with
this detail is out there.
Oh, I wish it was not. I wish I read that such details were not out there, so we can meet with them and conclude this. But there's very little I can do once the information is already out there.
But does this hinder your going forward with them?
It shouldn't. In my view, it shouldn't. Once we are looking for a solution, it shouldn't hinder any progress. The document has been leaked, it is out there. It shouldn't stop us from negotiating. Now, what is going to happen is that, is there going to be any document that is going to be tabled? When we conclude, the decision may be made official and for everybody to get to know. So I don't see how it will hinder, and it doesn't. I know that engagements are going on, whether formally or informally, engagements are going on, because we are all looking for an amicable solution to this, and we should be able to conclude as early as possible.
So you couldn't meet today, Wednesday, but when are you all sitting down at a table?
I want to refrain from discussing when we are meeting and when we are not meeting, because it puts pressure on everybody. And as a lead negotiator, it shouldn't be coming from me when we are meeting, but it is very soon.
Would you meet the deadline that they've given? I know you don't like deadlines.
It's a bit problematic when we discuss a deadline. Assuming they come today and say, or we meet tomorrow or tomorrow next, and they say, oh, we've accepted government proposal. Negotiation ends. Or we meet and government says, we've accepted your proposal. Negotiation ends. But that is why we call it negotiation. There are two parties negotiating, and therefore you need to win the heart of each other to be able to reach a certain consensus, get understanding of each other to be able to reach a certain consensus. That is the most difficult aspect of the negotiation. And so it becomes difficult for you to say that you conclude negotiation by this. We've had, you can ask GMA, we've negotiated into midnight, sometimes 10, 11. We are with GMA negotiating. It has happened before. In the night, we are negotiating. We don't even conclude answer by the National Labour Commission. Midnight, we are sitting down negotiating. We've done all this before. And so it is important that we need to be sure, as government and lead negotiators, that it is not dragged unnecessarily. That is a fact. We need to do that. But they also need to be sure that they also don't stick to just one position. So we will all be flexible enough to have those negotiations.
Have you presented your counter offer, if you like, to them?
Oh, yes.
Have they given you any response?
Oh, yes. I think some of the proposals have been agreed on. It's a whole document. A whole document of about 6 or 7 chapters. The conditions of service. It's a whole document on its own. And several aspects of the conditions of service have been agreed upon. And we've got into these other critical areas where it borders on money. Even some of the ones that borders on money have been agreed on. So I'm sure we will make progress.
We wish you the best in your negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.